Hi, I am Todd VanHooser, author of the Laughing Moon Chronicles, and you are listening to Legends of Tabletop.
Hey Todd, how's it going tonight? How you doing?
You have me on.
Oh, absolutely. I will point out to everyone that this is the live stream for the podcast. So if you're watching this live, thanks for tuning in. If not, you're catching this later. So thanks for downloading. so we met at RenCon briefly. Got a chance to talk to you a little bit. You were doing a panel on world building, epic world building, as I remember. Do you do a lot of cons over the course of the year?
Yep. Building. That was, in fact, I think that was the first panel I'd been on for a couple of years. I'd taken a couple of years for a couple of years. And yeah, it was kind of good just to get back in the swing of things.
That's cool. Is that something you're going to, maybe get more into now that, you have not only the novels, but the games going to try to, just be out in the public and, get people playing and reading?
Number of years, Laughing Moon was a very active part of, kind of the Arizona scene especially, but Vegas and we did a lot of the Strategicon conventions in LA. I had some personal issues that, life happens, took a step back from everything creative for a while. Art one way or another. I'm not sure how that actually goes, but I took a break from it all, and I'm back on the scene, more excited than ever at this point. I've got some new stuff up my sleeve, and I'm definitely eager to get back. That was something I dearly missed, actually. That, tabletop gamers, it's great. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and RenCon's one of the better ones too. It's it's a relatively small convention, so you see the same people all the time, and you get a chance to play a lot of different games. That's a really nice convention to be at.
Oh, RenCon's great. In fact, my group and I used to do it consecutively for a number of years. I missed it, actually. They're great people, great gamers in Tucson, so it was really fun to get back on that scene.
Cool. And you started writing like really early. You had your first story published at 17.
Yeah, I did, for better or worse. Probably for worse. I think back then, a little bit of talent and a whole lot of luck, and it definitely set me on my way for sure. I always wanted to be a writer. I think a lot of people say that, but I actually wrote. I started creating things. I went to University of Missouri for creative writing. Here I am. So
that's awesome. What sort of got you into writing? What was it about storytelling that sort of captured your imagination?
Oh, wow. Well, I am of that age group that saw Star Wars in theater when I was 3 years old, and I think that there's something really to be said about our generation. We have a number of storytellers that come out of, children of the 80s, especially. And as a kid, I watched great movies. I heard fantastic stories. And as I grew older, I felt like I had a voice to add to that collection. Kid, I absolutely loved when my younger brother would have his friends over, because we would play, we'd play our games, whatever that might be. But at some point, inevitably, I would be sitting in front of those kids telling a story. And as that evolved over time, the dice got involved at some point. And, I think that it path as a storyteller and as a game master and as a game designer eventually.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like D&D sort of, helped to propel you in that direction then, with just the inherent, sort of creativity that's involved in not only running, but playing?
Oh, absolutely. I was a storyteller at heart from a young age. What's great about this hobby is that, games like Dungeons and Dragons, and role-playing games in general, they provide us a platform. They build in a unique audience for storytellers. Audience, which is, you know, a very important thing to a storyteller, and they're an engaged audience. And with that, you know, those two things coming together, you can't lose. You know, if you've got a good storyteller and a captive audience, I mean, magic happens.
Mm. Yeah, it's such an awesome hobby to be a part of. I always say that, you know, I do this like every week, and you know, it comes up and you keep saying it, and people are like, yeah, or whatever, we get it, like the games. But it's so awesome to just be sitting around with a couple of people and just, you know, just sharing in a and you know, some of these campaigns go on for, you know, 10 and 15 years, and people will play characters like forever. It just becomes part of the zeitgeist for a group of friends.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I've been doing this for a long time. I've watched as a role-playing hobby. I hate using D&D because I don't personally play D&D. You know, we do my game at this point. Right. But role-playing games in general, you know, back in the 80s, we took our knocks. We had a hard time wanting even to admit, hey, I'm a gamer. I play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. You know, there was a definite stigma about it. And now we have TV shows, you know, like Stranger Things, where it's now become a pop culture thing. It's cool to be the nerd rolling dice. No longer hiding out in you know, basements doing this, where we're a growing community of gamers that enjoy this. You know, you mentioned the campaigns that go on for years. I think what I do is unique in that idea. I know a lot of gamers, they play, you know, one shots. They've got groups they jump in and out of. I have told one continuous story for 20 some years now. And what's fun about that for me especially is I'll take my game to a convention, new players to it. We'll have a whole new set of adventures just tie into this overarching story that's been going on for, you know, a couple of decades now. And there's definitely a sense of legacy, of footprints in the sand with Laughing Moon that I really enjoy, and I think that a lot of our gamers, you know, that it makes them want to come back to.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, creates such a rich tapestry to tell stories and have that, you know, just a really in-depth setting. I mean, the game that you were playing on Sunday, and I didn't realize the significance you know, prior to jumping in. I didn't see the messages till afterwards. And my condolences on Pat's passing. And you know, even though I didn't know Pat's, you know, part of our collective community as gamers. And you know, I feel like, you know, we all kind of take the hit there, and the game was sort of, you know, an homage to him and his character, and, you know, starting to be able to tie this. And it's amazing. Like when I saw that afterwards, I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't know that beforehand, because I've probably just been weeping in front of the monitor. Like, but it's so cool to be able to do that. It's just really amazing.
It was cool. Pat and I grew up together. I mean, I met Pat when I was 12 years old. For anybody who might be tuning in, I'm talking about my friend Pat Roper. He was a longtime host of Fear the Boot podcast, a lifelong gamer, and we lost him on December 28th. He was a huge part of this community that we're talking about. I'm still having a very difficult time processing this loss. I felt personally I needed to pay tribute to Pat. He had such a major impact, not only on my life, but, you know, specifically on this hobby and this world that I've created. So yeah, you know, to parallel that adventure, to allow my present day gamers to go back and kind of rub up against the events that occurred at a gaming table 20 some years ago. It was really cool. And neat for me to see at my table that I had hoped for back from a lot of people on Twitch that watched it. They also had a similar response, and it really did in a lot of ways.
That was really cool. And then to see some of the other players in the chat as well, oh, I'm sitting in the corner smoking a pipe, or I'm doing this or that, sort of like off screen. Like I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah. It had always been a dream of mine to, well, let me back up. I grew up in Missouri, and I had a big gaming group that I absolutely adored back home. And when I moved out here, I created a new gaming group, and it had always been my desire at some point to unite these two. And, Sunday night's adventure finally allowed me to do that in a very real sense. I had gamers literally interacting with gamers that I had, a couple of decades ago. And that was really crazy. It was really cool. And hopefully we'll be able to do more of that in the future too.
Yeah, it's cool now. Like I, grew up playing games around a table or in the backyard or whatever. And now, like, for the podcast, I don't do any in-person gaming unless I'm board gaming now. Like all of my role playing is online for the podcast. And it's definitely it's different for sure. And it's still a lot of fun, but it's still not quite the same thing.
I understand. I mean, there's definitely you can't replace with that in-house group. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. Jump back to writing a little bit. Fantasy is obviously your wheelhouse. See what I did there? But you've also done some horror fiction as well. So what do you feel more comfortable writing? Or, are you planning on writing other genre fiction in the future, or just stay sort of with the fantasy right now?
That's a good question. That's a very difficult one for me to answer, especially right now. I've always enjoyed fantasy fiction in particular, and I've dabbled in a little bit of horror, suspense. Right now, really, what I'm at this particular point in my life is that I'm moving away, not entirely, but I'm moving away from myself as even a writer, that online or entertainer to tell are going to be live, at least in some fashion, on Twitch platform. For me, I've spent a lifetime stories, whether they're short stories or novels or whatever. Even my personal perspective of myself into that online storyteller is very different. So way of answering your question is right now is crafting those stories to that live audience online.
Okay.
So if we go in another direction down the road, definitely my focus.
Okay, well, that's fair. I was going to ask you if you had any particular procedure or rituals or whatever when you write, but I guess we'll just kind of push that over here.
Well, I mean, I can definitely address that. There's writers go through their own creative process. I think it's a love-hate relationship where very lonely job, and I think that you see the peaks and valleys of success and failure and self-confidence and self-defeat. That this is beautiful and this is great, and you love everything that you've written. It's what am I doing? I'm wasting my life. I hate myself. It's you build yourself up and you tear yourself down. So I think my writing process was destination, staring at a screen, work. Myself, I found myself to be an actual writer. And I think having that willingness to go back into the material and tweak it, rework it, cut to the bone when necessary, it worked. It usually worked to my benefit.
Okay. Yeah. It sucks as a creative group of people that, there's so much, self-doubt and self-criticism and everything. Is like, you create wonderful things for people, as authors, as game designers and whatever. And it's like, there's so much loathing that goes on behind the scenes that most people don't see or don't realize. It's a very double-edged sword. It sucks.
It does. It really does. It can be really tough. It really can. But I've been particularly very lucky to have a number of very loyal people and friends that helped build me back up. And I honestly don't think I could do what I do without that love and support. They really believe in it. Time, maybe even up to the last couple of years, to really realize, this isn't about me. And for so long, it felt, like this isolated process of me writing the stories and games and the adventures and, running all of that. But it's about this collection of people over the course of 23 years now that have created Laughing Moon with me. And it is very much it is as much theirs as it is mine. Reconcile that, and I think it's changed my perception dramatically.
Okay. The Baron 12 is the first novel that's set in the world of Laughing Moon. Right. And it came out in 2008, I believe.
8.
So did the game come about before the novelizations and telling those stories? And did you do it like in a D&D setting, or was Laughing Moon sort of something that's been play tested now for 23 years?
Well, I think my world, like so many others, it was a homebrew. It was just a patchwork of different systems that I felt like this rule didn't. And by the end, it was this Frankenstein's monster of, house rules. Ever dreamed of putting any of that down in a publishable form at all. That it was for me and my friends. And I was a writer. I wrote novels. I wrote short stories, period. But that being said, we went to a couple of gaming conventions early on just to promote the novel, Frankenstein monster homebrew sessions, and people fell in love with the setting and asked when the game book was coming out. And that took me very much by surprise. So I took a couple of years and put together a game book. Now, in retrospect, I'm in a different place with the gaming system now. Wheelhouse, it is Laughing Moon, but it's the future of Laughing Moon. We're in a post-apocalyptic world, and I think a lot of the reason behind that is, looking back, I think that the system that I finally did publish and create, I'm still proud of, but it's very much just a love song to a lot of older games that I used to play as a kid or as a young adult. And the game itself didn't offer a whole lot of unique ideas, especially for a player. I think it definitely does. It provides a better storytelling system, I think. So I'm more content as a game designer, I guess, in this Wheelhouse skin.
Okay, all right. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a storytelling game. I mean, that's it's. The fantasy's fantasy, right? So like what does a new fantasy system bring to the table? And not that Laughing Moon doesn't stand up, but as you're kind of going through the process and people are picking it up and looking at it, it's like, okay, well, how does this relate to the games that I know, like D&D and Pathfinder?
Right. I think at a certain point, creators, you're going to hit the stumbling block of, well, this has been done, and it may have even been done better, but I don't know that should necessarily always be a stopping point to get your own ideas out there. Laughing Moon is a story, and I simply wanted a system that would support that story and allow for myself as well as other gamers to game, to play, and to create all at the same time, and to feel like they were a part of that creative process, especially, while gaming at the table.
Okay. So are we probably not going to see a second edition then for Laughing Moon as you're moving forward on Wheelhouse then?
Well, I've got a Wheelhouse system. It's, the Wheelhouse RPG is its own system, and you know, technically it is version 2 of Adventures Under the Laughing Moon. It is the same world. It's the same characters very much. And, you know, it offers, I think, a much more interesting setting, particularly, and venue for storytelling because of that than what the old system did. And, you know, I've got a rule book that will, you know, eventually be available. And I think it's a lot more sturdy and a lot more streamlined than what the old one was. It's a much easier system to simply pick up and play. That's for sure.
Okay, and is it? You want to tell us a little bit about it? Is it still fantasy? It's post-apocalyptic to, you know, the initial setting of Laughing Moon.
Exactly. You know, you throw out the post-apocalyptic words and everybody thinks that it's Mad Max and you're going to have, you know, junker cars and shotguns or something, but that's not the case. It is a post-apocalyptic fantasy world. So the idea is that at some point in our history, the moon has exploded. We've got just a sickle moon, so we still have our laughing moon in the sky. The world itself has been utterly destroyed and then remade by this mysterious tower called the Wheelhouse. And players, especially I think veteran players, they get to enjoy the idea of bringing back former characters, even if they died in game. These characters, any character, whether you're a new player to the game or an old veteran player, you're bringing to life a resurrected hero that is brought back to life for a specific purpose. And within that purpose, there's a lot of moral gray zone that they have to navigate. And it makes a lot of fun for a storyteller because you've got characters that are defined by a certain set of truths. And then the Wheelhouse asks them to go out and perform a particular purpose or duty. Oftentimes that purpose will rub up against those truths and really challenge them as players. I think that's where a good game master thrives.
Yeah, and it's great for storytelling too, because if everybody just wore a white hat or a black hat, okay, yeah, I mean that may be fun. You roll a lot of dice and you kill monsters or whatever. And Ross Payton at RPPR, like that's his ballywick is to give characters morally ambiguous choices. It's like, sure, you can survive this scenario, but you're gonna have to kill this busload of children or whatever it is.
Right.
It makes for great storytelling.
I think so too. And the fact is, as players and as gamers, I feel like we can relate to that a lot better than playing the White Knight or, you know, the goateed villain. We are all flawed people. We're good guys in our lives, and sometimes we're the villains in our lives. Mm-hmm. And you know, not everyone likes to admit that, but it's certainly true. And I think Wheelhouse allows that opportunity to play an actual character. They might be called heroes, but that's just one perspective. You know, I enjoy that.
That's like what we see with The Walking Dead. You know, if we had followed, you know, say another group through this epic story, then, you know, Rick and his group would seem like these utterly insane, horrible people. But since you start the story with them, you're like, no, screw those guys. They're terrible. And our guys are great. But it's okay. It's all shades of the same spectrum, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. It's a difference in saying good guys and bad guys and protagonists and antagonists. And there's a massive shift in that perspective when you change the language.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And you're, you know, good in the novels and the initial telling of Laughing Moon, of having that sort of moral gray where your bad guys aren't, you know, the goateed guy with the, you know, the black hat and whatever. And you know, again, it tells to better storytelling. So that's, you know, a better story to read, a better game to play. And yeah.
One of my favorite things attending conventions, I used to do Comic-Cons often, you know, especially when the novels were out and I was really pushing those. But occasionally I would get someone that would want to come up looking for a sequel or whatever. And I would always ask, who's your favorite character of the Baron 12? And I absolutely loved the few occasions when someone would say the bad guy or, you know, the antagonist. This was their favorite character. And that was so cool to me that they could relate to this character and the box that they had been put in that forced them into the situation and, you know, into the the actions that they performed. That was really cool that they could, I don't know, take this bad guy and fall in love a little bit.
Mhm. Then you ask them to play on the other side of the table.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So there's a little bit of a gap between the first and second novel. So you took some time off to work on the game system and kind of get all that stuff squared away. Was there, did you feel that when you were out and about and be like, hey, when are we getting more story? What are you doing? What are we working on?
It was a tremendous amount of good pressure, I guess. There was, and no one put more pressure on the sequel than myself. And the truth is, it was constantly in the background. I went from publishing The Baron 12 to immediately working on that sequel, but then it took a back burner to the game book. And then once the game book came out, I developed 2 different supplements to that, plus a series of adventures called The Ragged Man, which was kind of an old school module, a 3-part adventure that was like a horror fantasy mashup. And I loved that. After that, I did 4 different graphic novels, a couple of short stories, and then finally I got back around to completing the sequel. That was unquestionably the most difficult thing I've ever written in my life. And I think that it is unquestionably the best thing I've ever written in my life. I'm really proud of it, but it took a lot out of me. A lot.
Cool. How do you find the time to do all this, right? You're a teacher of over a decade now, right? You're married, you've got kids, how are you working on all this stuff?
Well, back in those days, a lot's changed now for me. I don't know how I found that time. I really don't. There were a couple of years in particular where I would look back at what was done, and I don't know how I squeezed all that in. My life has definitely taken a lot of turns now. I'm no longer teaching. I'm doing what I do full time, developing this Laughing Moon world to push it harder and further than what I've ever done before. And at the same time, I'm no longer writing the novels. So it's, it's a weird trade-off for me because I'm pushing this story onto this new platform, and it's a great deal of work, but in a whole different direction. So it's tough for sure.
Congrats and good luck. That's awesome and scary all at the same time.
I'm going to need it.
Well, that's crazy. So how was your Kickstarter experience when you went through and were looking to get funded the Laughing Moon adventures?
Kickstarter was really interesting because we did 2 successful ones, and this was several years ago at this point, and we kickstarted The Ragged Man, and we had a pretty modest goal set out for us, and we ended up just blowing far past that. I think we exceeded 500% of that initial goal. And I really don't know what went right with that one, because I think there was a great deal of luck. We had a really good push, a lot of momentum behind us. But the landscape of Kickstarter has certainly evolved and changed, in other words, I think if I were to go back and launch that exact same type of book today, I think I would be hard pressed to come anywhere close to the goal that we had back then. The landscape's just so vastly different. And the expectation, I think, from backers has changed dramatically as well. So it's a challenge for sure. And I have a lot of people asking, well, you're going to try to kickstart Wheelhouse. And honestly, I don't know. That's a definite possibility, but I really don't know right now. I've got a lot more research ahead of me. That's for sure. Yeah.
It's, Kickstarter now is at a point where, it seems like most people look at it as a pre-order service, and people wait, like, how many stretch goals can I get? How many exclusive things can I get? Like, where, okay, sure, I can back it, but I'm going to wait and see if I can back it and get even more stuff. So it is a really finicky sort of, scenario where some things are super successful for maybe no apparent reason, and other things you're like, wow, this should be great, and you're like, wow, that didn't fund. I wonder like what happened, or maybe it just funded it. Yeah, it's really, really touchy.
It is. And timeliness is such a huge factor with any type of sales or product that's going to be released. I backed the Kids on Bikes Kickstarter, which looks like a fantastic game. It's going to be a lot of fun. And they are 100% riding the coattails of Stranger Things. And I think that they 100% acknowledge that. There's nothing wrong with it. But, a game like that 10 years ago, I think probably would have struggled quite a bit. It definitely wouldn't have had the momentum that it did, in other words. Mm-hmm. So, I'm content doing what I'm doing right now. If we kickstart it, we'll see.
Yeah. Is this whole thing still sort of a regional Arizona thing? You feel like you're kind of spreading tendrils at this point, being on Twitch and being able to bring more people to Laughing Moon?
That's certainly the plan. Finding that audience has always been my greatest challenge. And it's interesting because we live in a world that on the surface looks and feels so very connected, but in truth, it's tough. It's really tough. You've got Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, but so does everybody else. And the reality is, we're all kind of looking at our own little sandboxes, and not everyone wants to go play. So it's having Twitch allows me to showcase the story and showcase myself as a storyteller in a unique way that I just haven't been able to in the past.
Right.
So I'm very hopeful, for sure. I think that with this group, I've got a lot to offer. We've got some great stories to tell. I've got a great group of gamers that are fun to watch. And it's just a matter of plugging in the hours and getting friends to tell friends, that's the trick.
Mm-hmm.
Dragging people over and having them, sit back and watch for a little while.
Right.
Hope that they enjoy.
Yeah, it's unlike the heady days of 2006, 2007, when podcasting was just sort of really kind of taking root and all that. Now you're just shrieking into the void, like you say. Everybody has everything, and in some cases, like double. Like I have a personal Twitter and a Twitter for Legends, and a personal Facebook and a Legend.
Sure.
There's only so much time that people can spend doing anything. And like you say, there is an extreme amount of connectedness, but a lot of it is just, superficial. Like the number of followers or the number, it's not really indicative of how many people are actually engaged with, whatever it is that you're doing.
Definitely. And that's the trick. I've been a storyteller my whole life. I spent 12 years in front of kids as a teacher. I know what it's like to have an engaged audience, and I know how to engage an audience on top of that. I'm not just doing this to do it. I feel like we do have something to offer, and I feel like it's worth people's time to tune in. This is it's been an ongoing story, and it's been a great deal of work, not just on my behalf, but on a large collection of people. And this Twitch, it allows people that sort of window into this world in such a unique way that, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to have that engagement, the interaction with that crowd. It's really cool.
Yeah. And it's good that you guys have a storytelling game and that kind of vibe. And not all Twitch streams, and we have a page and we don't really use it because I don't want to learn like 12 other things, but to have a story game, I've heard people say, across social media, like, oh, I found this game, and they're actually role playing. It's not just rolling dice. It's not just fooling around. Like they're actually telling stories. It's so refreshing to see that on Twitch. So,
I'm glad. Yeah. And for me, we've spent the last several weeks looking at, okay, we've sort of figured out our Sunday night, the live adventures that we've been doing. What can we do next? So within the next few weeks, at this point, we're looking at adding 2 different broadcasts throughout the week. One of which will be another one that I'm running. And then the other one will be introducing another GM. So, and I'll get to actually play in my own game for the first time in a very long time. So, we've got a lot of different stories for an audience to find. And all of this is sort of one great big universe. It's all connected. A lot of excuses, I think, for people to get into this world and find something that they like.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you were writing the second novel, was there, a point when you're writing where you're, thinking of game mechanics, while you're writing, and vice versa? Like, okay, people are going to play this game, they need to be able to do, what I'm explaining. Was there any sort of like disconnect with trying to mesh those two things together?
A little bit, yeah. There were a couple of moments in game, or not in game, but in the novel, where I really had to sort of back down from what my initial ideas may have been, just so that if in game someone were to corner me, I could at least point to something in the game book that would allow for this to happen. Right. And I think if I were to ever have to choose, the fiction comes first. That's the story, that's the canon. Mm-hmm. And anything else, it's supplemental, and we'll make it up as we have to. If there's not a rule for it, I guess I have the luxury of saying, well, I'm the creator, I'll make one for it.
Right. Have you ever had anybody at a con be like, I read all the books, and there's no way that person can do that. I do all the things, and that's not going to work.
I've had a few guys that were like the real rule hounds, the people that just really, they want to break down the rules and follow it. That's just so not me that I still try to make it enjoyable for them. And, obviously I'm going to acknowledge that, that tendency and that gaming style. No one's ever really pinned me down quite like that, thankfully enough. But, if they did, I guess I would just have them make it up however they saw fit. Let them run with it.
So when was the last time you actually got to play as a player? So you're excited to be able to get a chance to play. When was the last time?
That's a great question. Man, there for a little while, I had a couple of internal game masters with our Laughing Moon crew. They would run games, and on occasion, I would get to pop in on those games, and that was a lot of fun. But man, that's probably been at least 2 or 3 years. So I'm really looking forward to it. And, I'm developing a character of my own to play for the first time and forever. So that's really cool for me. I'm really getting into it,
That's awesome. Have you gotten a chance to play any other RPG systems, in the intervening time, or are you pretty much just playing in Laughing Moon right now?
Yeah. I mean, I love watching and popping in and seeing other games being played, and I think that's great. I just don't. I don't play other games, and I read other games. I try to stay up to date on other things that are coming out, and I'm familiar with it. But I just don't have a whole lot of free time anymore. And like I said, I did back this Kids on Bikes Kickstarter, so maybe I'll be playing that down the road. That looks like a lot of fun, I got to admit. I got to play Deadlands there for a while, and I absolutely fell in love with that game. That was so much fun. But anymore, I don't really have a whole lot of free time to do it. So if there's a game being played, it's probably going to be Laughing Moon.
I run up to that so many times with, board game designers and RPG guys that come on and they're like, nope, it's the thing that we're doing. That's all we do.
Yeah. And for me, it's a labor of love to begin with. So, I built the sandbox so I could play in it, and here I am still.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When you were teaching, you had a Laughing Moon Con. Did that come about from, your experience with the kids at school? Was that like a school kind of only event, or?
Yeah, that evolved over time as well. I had someone at a certain point years ago suggest to me that I should put together a mini convention. And I thought, all right, we'll give it a shot, see what happens. I had discovered that, that age range, the high school aged group, they're such a perfect fit for this hobby. They're highly interactive, they're highly imaginative, and a lot of these kids they've never heard of it. And getting out to, Phoenix Comic-Con or whatever they want to call it these days, it's a challenge for particularly a lot of the kids out in the area that I live in. So my goal was to bring a local convention, create that convention scene on a small scale right here. And it worked. There for a while, it worked very well. We had cosplayers coming out. We had artistic talent. We had a number of artists coming out. I had a couple of authors. We had the Will It Make It guys with their cool cars out there doing stunts. The Knight Rider car was out there. The A-Team band, the Ghostbusters came out. It was really cool. It was really cool. There for a while.
That's very cool. Did you have any like after school groups for either board games or role playing or anything like that? Did the school sort of allow that extracurricular?
Yeah, we had a role playing group after school that, it's kind of saw its ebbing and flowing over the years. We had a huge group for a while, and then it dwindled down, and then it got huge again. And what's cool is that there are a lot of schools that are still doing that. There's high schools out there with their D&D clubs, and they're introducing kids to the hobby. They're tapping to that, that creative community on that level. And hopefully we'll see these kids attending conventions down the road. That's the goal, I'm sure.
I wish they would have had that when I was in high school. We didn't have anything like that I recall.
Oh, no kidding. I mean, I grew up, in the Bible Belt, Missouri. I think there would have been pitchforks and torches, So yeah, it is what it is. But, we're lucky enough to live in a time now where this hobby is very much embraced. And you've got kids out there that are looking for a safe place for their creative ideas. And this community certainly offers that.
Yeah, and we're really lucky out here in Arizona. I know in Tucson, we've got like 5 or 6 game stores that do adventure leagues and all that kind of stuff. And we have like 8 or 9 conventions here in Arizona. It's crazy between Phoenix Comic-Con, RenCon, TusCon, which is more of a sci-fi, literary thing. But Arizona Game Fair is coming up in about a month.
We've got Crit Hit coming up in the summer.
Maricopa Con.
Yeah, there's there's plenty of opportunities for people to get involved, and I love it. We're really seeing this community come together in a big resurgence, and it's fun. It's a fun time to be a gamer.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. We're certainly seeing a renaissance in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have you ever used Meetup to set up sort of an RPG group in addition to what you have going on Twitch and everything else, just to sort of get it out there to sort of bring people in and sort of showcase what you have going on?
We once we really got our brains around launching the Twitch channel, that became a serious option. But as we began to move forward, I realized that having sort of that smaller group worked better, not just for the storytelling, but it just kept things moving along, and I think easier, particularly from that outside viewer's perspective. It's a possibility down the road, but at this point, knock on wood, I've got enough gamers in-house that I just don't have to utilize it. But knowing that it's out there it's definitely a perk.
Okay. And by the way you describe it, running, essentially the same campaign now for like 23 years, it makes it more of like a living style game, like like what they used to do for D&D. Now they do like an adventure league and things like that, where things that happen out here affect things like way over here. But it's not just for a season or for this campaign arc. It's literally the entire world.
Yeah. What I do, though, is that can be very offsetting to outside gamers or new gamers that I might hope to introduce into the Laughing Moon world. But I try to make everyone aware of the fact that even if you've never played before, the actions that you perform in game could have long-standing effects. The convention that I met you at RenCon, that was one of my favorite gaming conventions I've ever done. I always do a series of interconnected of games. So our Friday night adventure will continue down into Saturday all the way through Sunday, and etc. those games were huge for the world itself. And I was lucky enough to have some fantastic gamers on board too. These guys everybody that we played with was just amazing. They really embraced the characters and had fun with it. And the consequences of those games are still paying off in our current setting.
Nice.
So that's been a lot of fun, that we can bring this game to a convention, play with people who are brand new to the world that I've never met before. And, a year from now, when we touch base at RenCon again, they're going to see their footprints in the sand. They're going to see that what they did mattered. And I think that that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. Shit, I just had something that went away. Damn it, I hate when that happens. Do you have a nice cross section as far as people you see coming to play? Is it, like the D&D crowd can maybe be, people who are older, like our ages and up, that been playing since 1978 Absolutely. Or whatever. It's like my edition's the best edition, sort of thing. Do you see a larger cross section, or do you see more younger players, or how does it sort of break out?
It's definitely a good mix, I would say. And what's really cool, and RenCon was yet another example of that. We had people my age and older gaming with us, and then we had our Saturday game. I think we had at least 2 or 3 gamers probably in their 20s. And then we had a couple of kids in their, mid to late teens that they came on board. I don't know how they found us, but they signed up and, turned out they were great gamers. So it was a lot of fun. I love seeing that mix. I love seeing the veteran gamers come on board. I love having the newbies come on board, and everybody's able to interact, role play, and have some fun.
Cool.
I've been very lucky with that.
Yeah. Have you ever had an experience at a convention where you're running games and you have had, table conflict, or, just some sort of, gamers gate-esque shenanigans at a table that you've come across?
I mean, I've been fortunate enough not to have to deal with that much, but there've been a couple of events where we had that kind of oddball gamer that was there for all the wrong reasons, I think. And we were lucky enough to have amazing convention coordinators that were on that situation very quickly, and it was well handled, and we didn't have to worry about it too much afterwards. But for the most part, I've been very fortunate enough to play with some great gamers with a lot of different gaming styles, and not all those gaming styles mesh, that's for sure, and that can be a juggling act even up to today. That's tough to bring a game like what I have to Twitch and know that I'm no longer playing just for the gamers at the table. We are performing for an audience. And with that in mind, you've got to be careful on the type of person that you have involved. Mm-hmm. And that gets difficult. It's personal, but this is also professional for me at this point too. So I've got to pick and choose wisely. We'll see how that progresses.
Right. Do you find now, like, and maybe it hasn't changed at all, but do you find now with not only the Twitch stream, but in a convention setting and things like that, and acknowledging that it is a performance in some regards, do you find yourself GMing or storytelling in a different way when you're on games?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's funny because I love doing what I do. I really do. And I've had the opportunity to do it for a lot of years at this point, but I get nervous as hell every single time we do it. And on top of that, I am not comfortable in front of a camera. So it's very awkward to be doing that in front of, particularly a live audience on Twitch. What I try to do, and, it is definitely different than what I used to do. I feel like each story needs to be able to not only continue on to the next chapter, which would be next week, but it also must have its own sense of closure as well. And that can be tough because, any game master knows that you might plot out points A, B, and C, but you've got gamers that are going to bounce to, L to G, back to D, and maybe we wind up where we had hoped, but sometimes you don't. So Twitch is a little bit of storytelling and a whole lot of corralling squirrels. And, it's fun though. And I enjoy that, but it creates a new set of challenges as a storyteller for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's gaming for sure. It's herding cats.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was watching on Sunday, and so you get nervous every time, and you were, just kind of like chilling, laid back, telling a story, doing what, like I would have never guessed that you weren't like 100% comfortable.
No, I mean, there's a certain point in Sunday night's game, that ran very long, much longer than what we had hoped. Despite that, we still had viewers that toughed it out to the bitter end. I couldn't believe it. But at a certain point, I guess you hit your groove, you find your stride, and you relax a little bit more. For me, though, it is difficult because the presence of the camera is just always there, and I'm very aware that I'm not just speaking to the crowd at the table, that there are other people at home watching as well. And of course, that's what we want. And I'm just learning new ways to engage that audience and interact with them as well.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that everyone's enjoying themselves. Sure.
Yeah, we've come across the same thing with doing the podcasting. Like if you're playing at the table and like I say I look at you and I look at you, nobody can see that. So you have to be like I turn slowly to my right and I stare at whatever character's name is. So there's certainly a different.
It's a learning curve.
Yeah. You have to be more loquacious, I suppose, and really just kind of explaining things and really kind of trying to engage, people's thought about it. Because they're going to paint a tremendous picture if you give them, the proper tools to do so. So
absolutely. And it's fun because having this new media and the new platforms in which we can engage an audience, it creates really fun obstacles and interesting challenges for storytellers to overcome. And ultimately, I think it's going to help craft those skills. It'll make me a better storyteller in the long run, for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, you looked like you were already completely. So if you're only getting better, that's great for everybody.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Is there? Fuck. It went away again. I hate it. I have stuff written down and then things pop in and then they just kind of squirrel away.
I know how that goes. Believe me.
Yeah. Are you more, and I guess you're not going to be, writing for the novel so much anymore, but at the time that you were doing both, were you more comfortable, say writing, mechanics and story setting material for the role-playing game, or sitting down and writing just straight fiction and just telling a story?
Novel writing it's a monstrous undertaking. It's huge. It's difficult. It's lonely. It is anyone who has not actually written a book. And there are a lot of people that they're writing a novel, right? I've met countless people. I'm writing a book. No, you're not. You're talking about writing a book. But anybody that's actually done it, it's a hard, long process. And when you're in it and you hit that slipstream, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it in the world. There were days I remember, particularly with that second novel, where I would spend a day writing, and it felt so good that I literally would feel that anything I touched with my hands afterwards were leaving letters behind. I don't know how to otherwise explain that, but the work behind that was tremendous. What I found personally that I enjoyed the most, hands down, was writing those graphic novels, the comic book writing. That challenged me in ways that I didn't anticipate, because you strip down and lose everything that I had built myself up for my whole life to learn how to write. And then you remove that completely. and it's just dialogue.
Mm.
And you have to rely on, this marriage of scenery, the art, and then the dialogue of the writer to tell a story. And it almost broke my brain to figure out how to do this. But once I did, man, I fell in love. I could write Laughing Moon comic books until I died. The problem is finding artists that are willing to, I can't afford to pay somebody out to do that.
Right.
I need to be able to work jointly with somebody and collaborate. And, that's a pipe dream, really. So that's why I'm doing what I do now.
Okay. All right. When you were writing, did you ever have, go in with a set idea, these are the beats I want to hit, and this is kind of the outline that I have, and then have characters come in and say, no. I know you want to do that, but what we're going to do is this over here.
Yeah. Yes is the short answer. Yes. But what I found both as a writer and as a student of writing, that early on, especially as a young writer, the first novel, the first draft of the Baron 12, I got to page 400 and something and realized that the story was writing me. I was no longer writing the story. It was going off in these directions that were really fun to write and really interesting, to pursue. But there wasn't an actual story being told, not one specific, avenue that was being pursued. I think that to successfully write, you've got to have that end game in mind. You've got to know where you're going, and you've got to be willing to sacrifice certain ideas along that path. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. But of course, you do have, those characters or those situations that show up in the middle of the writing that do maybe take things in different directions. And sometimes you've got to listen to it. I vividly remember writing the Baron 12, and that's a big fat book, and it took me a long time to write. And I was deeply into that. Like, my headspace was very much, occupied by all this. And I would dream of the writing from time to time. And I remember I had a dream in which this character was killed off. And afterwards I said, wow, I think this character is going to die. And the person I was talking to said, what do you mean you think that this character is going to die? You're writing the story. Why don't you know that the character is going to die? So, there's definitely those moments where, as a writer, I think that you're surprised, sometimes pleasantly surprised, that, the story lives on its own.
I'm gonna fire off a quick email to George R.R. Martin and let him know he needs an end game.
Yes,
we can see.
We'll see how that goes, right?
I can only imagine.
Everyone dies.
Right. Fuck you guys. It's everybody's dead. The world explodes.
Right.
Oh boy. What's on deck for Laughing Moon Productions here coming up? I know we're talking about expanding the Twitch and adding a couple of more games, some more streams going on. What else is in the works?
Yeah, right now I'm crafting our Sunday night adventures from here until I die, and we're adding in a solo adventure called the Bonecaster Diaries. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to introduce a brand new character type for Laughing Moon and for Wheelhouse. Like I said, we're going to have another adventure. I think we're going to call it the Meridian Log. It's sort of and that's not the one I'm going to be GMing. Griffin's going to be running that game. And the idea is sort of Lost meets Star Trek Voyager set in our fantasy world. It's our characters get lost at sea, basically, and each episode, each game will be us trying to find our way home while exploring new corners of the world that we've never seen before. One of the other really fun things that I get to enjoy and partake in is that my best friend is a makeup artist in Vancouver, and she is kicking some serious ass right now, creating these incredible characters. And she and I get to collaborate from time to time with different ideas. She just brought to life this dark elf character. It looked absolutely amazing. The pictures that she sent were so cool. And we've got a few more character ideas that we're going to be kicking around and, seeing what we can do. I've always said Laughing Moon is all about bringing fantasy to reality. So Twitch, we're able to bring our games to the audience. This cosplay and makeup artist stuff, we're able to bring the characters in our minds physically to life. So, that's what it's all about with Laughing Moon.
That's cool.
Seeing what we can push forward and into next.
And we can see some of these pictures on the Instagram, on the Facebook page and all that?
Yeah. Katie's work is, if there's a cool character that's, a model, more than likely Katie's created that character and, to be featured on my Instagram. It's just Wheelhouse RPG. And anytime she's in town, we'll be creating something, bringing something new to life. And she's in Vancouver now, so it's a little bit more challenging to get together. But when we're able to attend conventions together, we'll certainly be doing that too. Hopefully bringing new stuff to life.
Cool. Very cool. I had heard in another interview that you said you wanted to create a world that was Tolkien-esque in its scope. Do you feel like you've succeeded?
Oh God. I don't know. I mean, that's for myself. Yes. I've done what I set out to do. I spent more than half my life developing this world. When I was in college, I spent years creating the backstory, just the histories, the gods, the magic, all of this stuff. One of my good friends in Missouri called it the Todd Marillion. It was, it's the kind of stuff that nobody in the world would want to read, but it had to get done to develop the world that I would create later. I don't know that anybody's going to create a world like Tolkien's or even aspire to, but for myself, I've got a living, breathing world. I've got a place that people want to visit and play in and read about and enjoy. And as a creator, as a writer, I'm happy with that. I hope I can bring that world to a larger audience because I think that there's a lot to love here. I really do. But I've learned to appreciate and, what I've got. That was always a challenge. I think as a young man publishing a book, there was never enough. I could never sell enough. I could never get enough. There were never enough gamers. There was never enough. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge fault of mine. I was incapable of appreciating what I had right in front of me. And I'm definitely soaking up the love that I have right here and right now. I've got a great group of people involved and they lift me up. They believe in what I do and they want to be a part of it. And what more could I ask?
That's awesome. I think that's a good way to end. on an up note. Thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure to talk to you. The panel I still have not posted yet. We'll probably post this month because end of the month is a little short as far as scheduled guests. So we'll get that one posted next so people can sort of follow up on this conversation with that panel. There's links for everything, in the show notes for the Facebook, for the Instagram, for Twitch. So everybody go and check all those things out. Hit the likes, hit the subscribes. Please do that for us as well. We certainly appreciate that. Again, trying to help spread the word, because if you help us, we can help content creators like Todd to get their games and novels and all these different products out and really support and bolster the community that we have and really get to enjoy, because it's all about the people. It's all about the games. It's all about that connectedness that we're all trying to foster.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So absolutely. So I would certainly appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, you bet. Game on.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for checking it out, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.